Roses are red, violets are blue. Livy got one, but Rovers got two. And now that we've established the level of poetry skills from your host today on the Oh No 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 podcast, welcome back to a mildly hungover couple of folk and Alan, who's very refreshed as well. My name's Robbie Weir, and today we're going to take a look back at Raith Rovers' win yesterday over second place Livingston and Davy Martindale's Giants. Joining me today, as I say, firstly got Alan Douglas-Bunn. How you doing, Alan?
I'm all right. Yeah, I was driving for our night out last night, so I'm nice and fresh and recovered from the panic after basically breaking the main stand at Starks Park yesterday. Well, technically only a key, but they nearly had to break the stand to get me into the announcer's box. But it was all good in the end.
Second week on the job, is it?
Yeah, pretty much. First time having to open the box up myself, and I broke the key. So yeah, good start, Alan.
You got there in the end, though. That's the most important
absolutely.
thing. And then we're joined by the unbeaten man, free from free. We've got Scott Fleming joining us. How you doing, Scott?
Yeah, I'm really good. To be fair, I was expecting to feel a wee bit rougher after the weekend, but no, it's. I suppose it's made better when you get another win and feel good factor's still here. I must say, I did put it on Twitter earlier, coming into the games when I was coming back home, I did not expect to come home to 3 wins in a row. I thought, well, if we can get 1 or 2, it'd be nice, but it's good that they've managed to turn it around, and we're arguably probably the informed team in the league, maybe other than Partick just now, so hopefully another one coming next weekend.
Yeah, well, we'll take a look back at yesterday first. So we'll just start with the easiest point, which is going to be from the lineups. So John Potter came in with 2 changes right from the start, with Liam Dick replacing Lewis Gibson, and then Dylan Easton came in as in terms of the squad for Kai Montague. Alan, just your thoughts when you saw that, just the sort of changes going for that. I know that there had been a lot of talk in the background. You find out after that Rovers have had a sort of illness bug in the camp. Just what was your sort of thoughts when you initially saw the squad?
Pretty much that it was the best available. There was a lot of guys out. It was a pleasant surprise to see Bruni on the bench, but I suspect he was nowhere near fit enough to actually make an appearance, and it was another one of these, we've got plenty of spare room on the bench, let's just put him on there as a kind of a distraction sort of thing, because I don't think he was fit enough to come on. It was as good as we could put out, I think, with what the players that were fit and available to play.
Yeah, I think the Easton coming back in was sort of a natural change. John Potter lines up with the sort of 3-5-2, so using the wing backs, which was positive to see, I'd say, just given the context. I think that, as well, for Kai Montague's done a good turn when he's been on the pitch starting, but at the same time, just that experience that Dylan Easton offers. And then again, with Lewis Gibson, it's good to have him there available. I think just with the change in formation, that naturally to have Liam Dick come in and offer that sort of experience at the centre-back role.
They're a big physical, experienced team. You need guys like, even guys like Aidan Connolly. Aidan Connolly's not a big guy, but he puts himself about, and he's been around long enough to know how to combat and kind of play against these guys. And like Easton's the same, not a huge guy, but experienced enough to kind of deal with that stuff. And I think you'd probably say the same with bringing Dick in to make it a back 3. It just kind of adds a bit more physicality to the team that ultimately you need against those big giants that they've got.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott, there was a return to the bench for Callum Fordyce, and as well Scott Brown, as Alan rightfully mentions there, he managed to make his way into the squad, but obviously Josh Mullen drops out. What were your sort of thoughts when you saw it? I know it seemed to be one of the easier ones that we've unpicked this season compared to other games where we've sort of been like, actually, we could see it's going to be a 3-5-2 pretty early on with Aidan Connolly up top, thanks to the expertise of Alan Russell again for that one. Continue to sing in the praise after the riding him on the podcast. But yeah, what was your sort of thoughts going into the game, and just do you think that was one of the easier ones to unpick?
Yeah, I mean, I think Alan touched on it as well. Like we we kind of knew roughly the sort of 11 that were probably going to get picked, just down to the fact that got a few injuries, and now we know we've had a bit of sickness in the squad recently as well. It was good to see Callum Fordyce back, because I had heard for a few people that he was really ill. I think Finlay Pollock seemed to get it quite bad as well, so also good to see him back. But hopefully that means that we're kind of on the mend again, and we can get back to sort of a full squad again, hopefully from next weekend, but we'll just see with that. And yeah, it was good to see Bruni as well on the bench, but I did have a feeling that was, if he was needed, it might have been like a 10-minute cameo. I didn't expect to really see him, but no, I couldn't really argue with the team lineup, to be honest, that Potter went with, because as I just said, I think it kind of, right now, you don't want to be tinkering too much with it, because we've been saying for weeks, why do we keep tinkering with it, and what players can't then get sort of comfortable in a formation or in a certain tactics with players, and I was just saying, like, so Freeman and Connolly coming back into the team a few weeks ago, they've seemed to have struck up a really good partnership in recent weeks. Liam Dick seems to have came on a game as well, so to be honest, I couldn't really argue with the team lining up at all yesterday.
Yeah, I think that one of the hallmarks over the last sort of period that we've gone through, where we've had these wins, is that for me it looks like the management team, whether it's been John Potter, whether it's been Neil Collins, we seem to go through these spells of kind of learning from our errors, and that we'll go through a game. We're not playing a full 90 minutes where we're sort of swashbuckling teams away, but it feels like we'll sort of, Queen's Park last week, for example, we changed it up, and then that's how we sort of continue on. Yeah, I'm just going to go back to yourself, Alan. Just a more general question this. Now, usually, obviously, losing a manager for most teams, a bolt from the blue, certainly, when Neil Collins decided to go to Sacramento, a big distraction. But do you think maybe our squad, maybe a bit, I'm not sure if it's too easy to sort of say this, given that we're not the players or things, but do you think our squad are maybe a bit more acclimatised to it now, given the sort of, this is the second time that has happened in the circumstances?
They probably are, to be fair. I mean, we've got a lot of experienced guys in the team anyway, so they've all been through it before. With us in particular, well, I mean, and then Stevenson and Hanlon have probably been through it more than most professionals have ever been through it from their time at Hibs. But with us, I think the issue that it's happened twice in one season, and you've got the same guys taking temporary charge now as did earlier in the season. And let's not forget, they were in charge for about 3 or 4 games before. But also, even throughout that time that Collins was there, and beforehand, like last season, Potter and Mickey were involved in day-to-day training. So ultimately, it shouldn't be day-to-day that different for them. You've got one less guy shouting instructions on the training pitch, and at the side of the pitch, Potter's in the dugout instead of over in the railway stand. That's the only real difference to them. So from a playing point of view, it didn't feel any different, other than, if anything, we actually started really well, which we've not been doing for the last few while. So if you could argue it's made a positive difference.
Yeah, well, we certainly started well on this one, given that we were ahead within the first 6 minutes. So, Scott, just you talk us through that opening goal, and just your thoughts on that pass from Liam Dick, pulling that one out of his locker, eh?
It was, as Alan's touched on, it was a really good opening sort of 10 minutes to us. And we've been saying it for weeks that we needed a game where we are the team on the front foot to start with, because the amount of games we've either given teams sort of the impetus to begin with and just let them sort of dictate the game. I mean, look at last Friday, for instance, at Hampden. We gave them 45 minutes to get into the game. But no, it was really good start. And to be honest, I don't know why, but it seemed to be there was more than just the guys that I was sat around that had to double check that it was Liam Dick that made the pass. Everyone just assumed it was Lewis Stevenson because it was for that left side. And it wasn't until I went back and looked at the highlights this morning, I went, not fair play, it was actually Liam Dick. But no, it was a...
You knew Graham was in the stand watching him.
it was a very sort of well threaded ball through. And I mean, I think the boy in Nottingham anyway, he's a bit of a cart horse. So I think any ball that's kind of, and I think Martindale said in his interview as well after the game that we had basically targeted sort of to get the ball in behind and start turning their fullbacks quite quickly. We did, and it worked. So, but they claimed that they expected that to happen, so they clearly weren't ready for it. But fair play to Easton as well, because he still had a lot to do. I did think I was a bit surprised that the keeper came so far out, to be honest, because I didn't think he was in like a clear, oh, he's going to score sort of situation. But no, he did well to go round and then still finish it off as well. But no, it was kind of the perfect start for us, because it meant that you could see also that the crowd have kind of obviously got more relaxed in recent weeks, the fact that we're winning games again. But you know that if you're 0-0 or you're not playing well or whatever, you can get a bit restless in the stand and folks start going, oh, well, can we start playing some decent football or whatever? But when you get a goal in the first 10 minutes, the place just gets a lift. And then, to be fair, I thought the atmosphere yesterday was pretty decent for most of the game. So that also, I think, spurred the guys on for that first half performance.
Yeah, I mean, Alan, Rovers seem to impose themselves really well. I know Scott's obviously touched on sort of Dylan Easton, how well he done for the goal, being able to take it past the keeper, and it's a really tight angle as well to be able to do that. But even after that, how much do you think that speaks to the sort of virtues of the sort of belief within the team of going out and dominating a game? And I know that a lot of the time, pre-match podcasts, I'll tend to ask questions about the other team, and then a lot of the responses will be, but we need to focus on what Rovers are doing. Do you think that's really a perfect example of that in this game? Just Rovers, they go up against a team that are second in the league, they've only lost twice, and yet they go out and they dominate that first half and show that they can do it. And they've, again, you could argue that they've done it in both the other games against Livingston as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of both in terms of it's about doing what we do well, but also not playing into their hands. I mean, if we decided to just start lumping long balls up, their defence eat them up all day long and have no problem at all. But there's a question about pace at the back with them. And, Connolly and Easton aren't the quickest, but they're probably quicker than me, but that's not saying much. But, what we were doing is we were targeting those wide areas. We were getting fullbacks overlapping. On the left-hand side, you had either Dick or Stevenson were kind of getting up there and supporting, kind of interchanging, which I thought they did really, really well, actually. And then on the right, again, as I think Scott mentioned, Freeman and Connolly are just really building up a good understanding with each other. It's great to see, actually. And it gives, they don't know what side it's coming when you've got guys like Byrne and Matthews who can spray the ball either way. And we were just like, right, we're not going to punt the ball up long to you. We're going to go down the sides. Lewis Jameson could drop out there as well. And we gave them a lot of trouble out in those areas and just avoided firing long balls up to them. And I do laugh at, Scott kind of mentioned it there, I do laugh at Martindale saying, oh, we knew they were going to do it. It's like, well, why didn't you set up to defend? Maybe they did. Maybe that's why they left Wilson out. Maybe they thought we were going to do that, and that was supposed to be, because they obviously had Nottingham was playing centre-half instead of right back, but made no difference. I think they struggled with it, really.
I think the real difference for Livingston, probably quite a damning indictment, was that they improved defensively so much when they actually got Nottingham further away from the defence, because he was pushing quite high up when he was playing in that second half as a fullback. But yeah, he's just an absolute hoodie, isn't he? And he's just a very unimpressive footballer. I think it's classic Livingston right now when you see that, just the sort of stature of their players and the size. And don't get me wrong, they do have like some players within there that have got some really technically gifted players. Definitely. I know that they were missing Jamie Brandon as well. He's a really big miss for them. But yeah, certainly Rovers exerted themselves really well, and that ended. I'll just stick with yourself, Alan. Just talk us through the second goal. Maybe a bit of a luck in the part of Lewis Jameson and the build-up, seeming to get a bit of a ricochet after the throw-in.
I mean, a wee kind of bit of luck there. A nice ball fired over, and just really good composure for Aidan Connolly. That's not a guy who's only just come back into the team in the last couple of weeks, having been inexplicably frozen out with all sorts of rumours going around. It just shows you that the rumours that go around are just pardon the language, but complete bollocks. Like, he's clearly been working hard in the training pitch. Whether he's been getting told you'll get your chance to come back in, I don't know, but he has. He's come back in and he's made himself undroppable again. And the composure and the wee touch and the finish were just... It was Aidan Connolly 2 years ago. It's what we came to expect from him when he was top goal scorer 2 years in a row. And he can't be far off of being top goal scorer again this season already. That'll be on 5 now, so I think Easton might be just ahead of him. But brilliant. Great to see. Just the place was just... there was just an air around Starts Park yesterday where even when things weren't quite going right, folk weren't getting on their back quite as much. There seemed to be almost a kind of siege mentality there. And we talked about that in the pre-match pod, actually, that maybe we needed that. And I think we had it from the team and from the fans.
Yeah, I think that it showed Rovers at their sort of absolutely best. That was the best 45 minutes I think that we've played this season. Quite comfortably that first half. Scott, I mean, the major chance that really came through was Aidan Connolly when he cut inside in that classic Aidan Connolly of 2 seasons ago. Just talk us through that chance and just really about how well he's starting to come back into the team.
Aye, when he anytime he runs down that right wing, to be honest, every time I'm just hoping that he gets that chop in and that left back that he's up against doesn't realise that's what he does. But it was just prime Connolly just cutting in, and then it just again because he had one in the Pars game again in the first half, but it was a little bit wider. I think this one I genuinely thought was in the whole way when he'd hit it, and I think there was some of the players I think thought it was in because you could see them straight away, hands on heads, thinking how close it was. But no, it was another great effort, but it was just another sort of chance and showing how much we had kind of dominated the first half. I think I would agree that we maybe didn't dominate the ball in terms of possession, but I think just chances and just the team more on the front foot, I thought we were. But Livy, they are a bit of a stuffy team, but they do have some decent players. I mean, you've got guys like Stephen Kelly, where I said at the start of the season, I was shocked that he even is still around at Livy, because I thought somebody like a Ross County or a Motherwell or somebody might have been kind of sniffing around them for a sort of bottom 6 SPL team. But no, I think we that the rest of the first half after the second goal, I just think that we kind of looked like a confident team, and I couldn't have said that 2 weeks ago when we played the Pars. We actually looked like a team that was not trying to make a mistake. Now we have that sort of bounce of 2 wins in a row, scoring goals in open play, which is another bonus, and we're actually just as I say, we look confident again, which is good to see, and hopefully get a couple of these guys that are injured back, like say Bruni, maybe Vaughan in a few weeks, Jack Hamilton, and then again you're looking at a full squad that can hopefully push on for maybe that 4th spot, because we're now actually getting closer to that than we are the relegation one, which after the Falkirk game I don't think anybody would have believed.
I think ultimately we let them have the ball, but Byrne and Matthews basically said, right, as soon as you get into our third, we're just going to shut you down. So, I mean, the two of them were outstanding in that first half. They were just brilliant. And they just, like, Pittman and Kelly are a really, really good midfield at this level. And they just kept them quiet and limited them to, I think the only real chance they had, well, there was a couple, Robbie Muirhead's pathetic free kick right into the wall. And then I think just before that, there was probably a cross that Liam Dick did really well to header off the line because they nearly flipped it. But other than that, I don't remember them troubling us much at all, really.
Yeah, the free kick from Muirhead was a bit of a strange one, wasn't it? Because they got the advantage and they played the shot, and then the referee hauled it back for the free kick at the edge, which did seem
Martindale wanted a red card for it as well.
Did he? Oh, they do, but. Yeah, just a really strange incident, and that's one of those moments where I know we were out just for sort of disclosure about this, but yeah, it's one of those ones where we were out last night for a few drinks after the game. I think it might have been like myself, Duncan, and Ian Lattle were having a chat about like the likes of Robbie Muirhead that he just turns up against your team from time to time, and you're just like, who is this guy? Because he's a big unit of a player, and he just looks like a galoot, and then he'll just pick a ball out from the air or fire in a 35-yard free kick or that. And it just seems a complete mystery. But yeah, for the rest of the first half, I felt that it was good. It felt like a Rovers performance where, again, we're missing so many sort of important players that there's almost been a bit of a trope against the team that they need these players to get points on board. So the likes of Vaughan, Stanton, Brown, and we can't do it without them. Whereas now we've got 3 wins on the bounce. We've had very limited involvement in terms of that, but other players stepping up to the mark, your likes of your Aidan Connolly's. Sean Byrne's been absolutely phenomenal recently as well. I think he deserves a lot of praise in terms of just the way that he's going about his business. So yeah, that was the end of the first half. So just how were you feeling, Scott, just going into the second half as well?
Obviously quietly confident that the boys could get the job done, going by the first half performance. But again, I went down and spoke to my dad at half time. I says, the last thing we need to do is come out for the 46th minute and just sit off them and allow them to play, because that'll just give them 5-10 minutes to build their confidence again. And then if they get the odd chance and take it, then the sort of pendulum swing will go with them, and then you start to worry, well, if they get one back, then we know what's happened a few times, recent times anyway, for Rovers with 2-goal leads or 3-goal leads. But no, I thought going into the second half that we would get the job done. But yeah, I think obviously we'll go into it now. But like, I think the 2 changes that Livingston made, I think we took a little bit too long to adapt to what they had done. Whereas I think teams have done that a few times when we've made half-time changes. They've not adapted to how we've changed. And I suppose it probably does take you 15-20 minutes to kind of realise, right, he's going here now, he's going here, so I need to be marking him instead of him now, and all that sort of stuff. So I don't blame them for it, but I do think we maybe just started off a little bit too deep too early on in that second half. And they never made loads of chances, but I just think we kind of invited them on a bit too much too early, sort of thing.
Yeah, that segues nicely actually into my next question. So Livy changed it up to go to a match our system, basically, that we played in the first half. They changed to a 3-5-2 using wing backs. So Andrew Shinney and Danny Wilson came on for Rhys McAleer and Finlayson. It also felt as well that Connolly seemed to move a bit further back, so he wasn't really being used as much as a centre forward. So it was almost like he moved into a wider position with Lewis Jamieson taking up sort of this lone striker role. So Alan, how much of that do you think was sort of, when we started the second half, was that a bit of a frustrating point for you to maybe see, given how well we'd done, or is it an understandable one, given that we had that 2-goal lead that really maybe shortened it up?
Probably both. Like, it's, I can understand why we've done it. We've seen the changes they make, and it made Shinney made a real difference to them in that second half. He kind of bossed the midfield for a fair bit of it. But you understand us thinking, right, let's just kind of protect what we've got for now, take the initial barrage from them, soak it up, and then kind of make our own changes and try and come into it. And essentially it worked. I mean, it was, we got like sort of 20-25 minutes through before anything kind of, and they never really created too many clear-cut chances. We did actually okay in soaking it up, and a lot of credit has to go to Murray, Hanlon and Dick, because I thought they were brilliant for the whole game. They just took everything that Livy threw at them. Even corners, which are normally something, you normally watch corners that we're defending through your hands, like, because you're just expecting a goal. Didn't really. I mean, the most notable thing that happened in a corner was actually up the other end when Danny Wilson nearly scored the most comical own goal I've ever seen. So I thought we took most of what they could throw at us and did all right with it.
Yeah, I think that you've got to give a lot of praise to that defensive unit. I know that there's, again, it probably speaks to the confidence that's maybe building within the squad, and again, these things can change very, very quickly. But the likes of Paul Hanlon, I think you've really seen Paul Hanlon particularly yesterday, in the last few weeks, he's been at his best. I think that he's looked a lot more comfortable than he did at the start of the season. He looks a lot more adjusted. And he's obviously got support there. Ewan Murray, he's had a fair degree of criticism, I would say, for the first half of the season, but he's been performing well in there. And then Liam Dick as well, just the performance that he put in to not only have the assists, but also just felt like he was just absolutely relentless at winning things in the air. And particularly given how the games against Livingston have gone this season, just really refreshing to see us being able to sort of keep them at arm's length. So yeah, just Scott, what was your thoughts on sort of the defensive side, and just as well, just give us a bit of detail about sort of Paul Hanlon, Ewan Murray, Liam Dick in particular.
Yeah, I thought the back three, back five, whatever you want to call it, I thought they were superb yesterday. I genuinely think you could have picked any of them for man of the match yesterday. But I mean, I would say basically since the Falkirk game, when we got a proper dressing down that day, I think the defence has been pretty solid, and they've actually looked like the defence we wanted them to be at the start of the season, but they were losing sort of silly goals and they were a bit of a soft touch. Whereas I would say basically since the Pars game, they've been a very solid unit, and they're working. You can see they're working for each other. They're covering each other. They're fighting for each other. I mean, Freeman was dead on his feet yesterday at that 90th minute. You could see him literally just drop to his knees about at the end. You see Lewis Stevenson also completely done in by the end of the game. So it's no wonder, because they're up and down each side, and they're covering each other. And yeah, the back three as well. I did think that was Ewan Murray's best game this season by a mile. I thought he was back to sort of almost prime Ewan Murray when we had him the first time around. And if we can keep that for the next 5-6 months, we'll be laughing. But again, yeah, Paul Hanlon commanded his area, and Liam Dick again. I would almost say it was probably his best game this season as well. So if this is the sort of formation that Potter's going to go with until a new manager or coach comes in, then I think this is the sort of backline you're going to need to keep using, because they clearly are playing well together, and I think any of them would find it extremely harsh to be dropped after the last sort of couple of games they've had together.
Yeah, I think that's fair comments to make, particularly as well to go back. I know that we don't really. Frankie Dabo obviously had a very serious injury, but the way that Freeman's acquitted himself since coming back, I know that we've touched on it before, but he deserves so much praise, both him and Connolly, because they've just looked like absolute mainstays in the squad. Livingston, just as it looked like Rovers were kind of overcoming the pressure and we were maybe beginning to find a little bit of a way into the second half, and then Livingston get their penalty. Just Alan, talk us through the penalty. What were your thoughts on it? Were you convinced one way or another from your tannoy booth that you
Well,
frequent?
it looked soft in first viewing. I do get the benefit of replays as well. I've got a Raith TV stream in my little box, and looked on there, and I was looking at it, still thought it looked soft. Watching the highlights back, and then watching the kind of full match replay back this morning, I still think it looks soft. But I suppose the most telling thing is that Ross Matthews doesn't really seem to complain too much. Davey actually mentioned something in commentary that he thought maybe he'd clipped his heels, and it's kind of difficult to see, but it's one of those. I wouldn't be screaming for it if it was the other way, because I don't see enough there, but it's one of those you kind of think, well, the referee's got a really good view of it. Matthews hasn't made too much of it. Fair enough. It's just really disappointing to have to announce my first opposition goal. Didn't like it. And I think that probably came across in the way I sounded over the tannoy as well, to be quite honest with you. But at least it was a penalty, though, because I was terrified I wasn't going to know who the scorer was. Stevie May's quite distinctive with his lack of hair now, as opposed to when he had loads of it. So it was, at least I was able to tell who it was as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Stevie May's haircuts, I think there's always a good opportunity there to identify him compared to other players. It's one of those ones where if you listen back, I actually caught the Livingston TV version of the highlights before Rovers had actually put theirs up, and they had their commentary overlapped onto it.
Okay.
They were talking how it was like a certain opportunity for Stevie May to score in the build-up, which seemed a bit strange because it did feel like he was a bit behind the ball, but then at the same time I would agree that I suspect there is a bit of a clip in there, and it's probably quite a telling indication that Ross Matthews doesn't protest it whatsoever. It was very funny though in the Macmillan Lounge after the game. Ian Latlow giving it both barrels to Big Kev after a few drinks, telling him that he moved. What was it? He moved too earlier. He was took 2 steps. It was, and the big man is ever gracious. Kev Dabrowski.
To be fair, it was a good penalty. If he'd gone the right way, he's probably not getting it. And ultimately, keepers shouldn't save penalties. If strikers hit them properly, no keeper should be able to save them. So, Kev's record on penalties isn't great. Obviously, he saved one against Dunfermline, which is always glorious, especially his reaction after it. But, yeah, it's one of those, how do you work on it? I don't know. I'm not a goalie or a goalie coach. I don't know how you make keepers better at saving penalties.
I don't think there really is a way for keepers to work on it, to be honest. It's just one of those ones where it's as the keeper, you can only ever be the hero in terms of penalties, because if it goes in, then the striker's done their job. I mean, other than maybe Ferry last week, where it sort of slipped under him, trickled under him. Other than that, very hard for you to put yourself in a position where you're getting berated for conceding a penalty as a goalkeeper. But if you save it, everyone's like, you're class, you're brilliant. So, Scott, later on in the second half, then Livingston's main grievance comes about in their second penalty claim. So, having the benefit of the sort of highlights, referee obviously decides that it's a dive. What were your thoughts on it? And just talk us through the decision.
I mean, I don't know if it's just me. I really struggled with the second one because he looks like he's kind of already going down, but then there is some contact there. So, like, I'm in the position of, I don't think it's a dive, but I don't think it's a penalty. So, like, you can get challenges that just aren't punished with a booking for not diving. To be honest, as I say, I don't think it's like an out-and-out dive like we've seen this season with a few different players, but so I don't even think I would have even booked him. I just would have said no foul, play on, to be honest. And I think Paul Hanlon's reaction told you that he clearly didn't think it was a penalty because he just turned around and just went with his arms. No, it was just straight away, that is not a penalty. But I don't think it was anywhere near as clear as what Martindale was saying that Lewis Smith thinks it's a certain penalty. He's going to tell you he thinks it's a certain penalty because he was the one that felt like he was fouled. But as I say, I don't think it was an out-and-out dive, in my opinion.
For me, it's one of those where he's anticipating the contact, but Hanlon just pulls out of it. And so I think essentially the Livy Smith, he kind of, in anticipating the contact, he initiates it. So it's like he goes into Hanlon and then falls over. So it's kind of one of those, it's not a dive in the sense that it's not one of these where there's absolutely no contact and he just looks like an idiot. But it's, to me, he has gone into Hanlon to try and win the penalty. Hanlon's pulled out of it. And as you say, Hanlon's reaction probably also makes the referee's mind up. The way he's so just like, nah, we're going to get up, man. Like sometimes if they start screaming and shouting at them for diving, you think, you're protesting a wee bit too much there to try and influence it. But Hanlon was just so calm and so he had no doubt that it wasn't a penalty. I think it probably does influence the ref. But I think ultimately the ref made the right decision in not giving the penalty. The bookings may be harsh, but also funny. So
I think that yesterday's sort of refereeing performance was one of those ones where the referee, while he got the big calls right, I think that there was still a lot to be desired in terms of like the stop-start nature of it, and as well the fact that it felt very inconsistent at points in terms of where he was coming for decisions. Again, with ones like the sort of second penalty shout, brilliant that he's managed to get that one and he's not been conned by it, if it has been a dive. But yeah, you would just see bits where the ball would go up the park and we would get a player bundled over and then the ball would come back down the pitch. And then the same thing happens for a Livingston player. they're big friendly giants that are, seem very, very susceptible to falling over, by the way. And all of a sudden, they're getting a free kick in the way. But yeah, for the remainder of the game, I think that while Livingston did have a lot of the pressure, there was never any sort of big moment. Like, you think back to the win that we had against Airdrie, for example, at Starks earlier this season. They had a big chance right at the end of the game where there was a penalty shout that they were trying to claim against Frankie Dabo. Like, I would say that Livingston never really had any big moments like that after going in towards the end of the game. What I do want to talk about, though, the Rovers subs, just for yourself, Alan, do you think those sort of maybe invited more pressure, or do you think they were born out of sort of necessity? So we had Cody David came on in the 67th minute for Aidan Connolly, and then on the 78th minute we had Callum Fordyce returning on. He came back for Dylan Easton. Kai Montague came on for Sean Byrne, and Finlay Pollock came in for Lewis Jameson. So obviously a couple of younger lads into the mix there. Fordyce, who's just back from a sort of longer term absence. And then as well, Cody David coming into the mix. So do you think that was sort of necessity because the squad were out on their feet, or do you think that it was maybe it's been done, but then we've ended up inviting more pressure on ourselves?
So, I mean, some of them worked. So Fordyce came in at kind of centre half. Dick went out to left back, and Lewis Stevenson kind of slotted into the middle to kind of take the Sean Byrne role. Probably the biggest indication that you could have that Scott Brown was not fit enough to take part in that game, because that would have been the obvious substitution. But I thought Stevenson did pretty well in there, and it's a kind of, it's food for thought, I suppose, going forward, that actually he's a good option in that area. I kind of ridiculed Craig Telfer on the Terrace podcast when he suggested that might be why he would sign them, but fair play, he did all right in there. And I thought Montague did okay as well. He does what he does. He puts himself about for a young kid. I was going to say a wee guy, but I stood next to him in the Macmillan lounge last night, and he's as you rightly pointed out when we signed him, he's quite a big lad for his age. But he put himself around really well. He tried. The ones that did have probably less of an impact were Cody David and Finlay Pollock, and the simple fact is both of them just couldn't retain possession. There was a couple of times David was through, and there was maybe a ball on there, maybe into one in particular I could think of. He had Montague with him, and he could have just slipped it through, but he just kept trying to take that extra touch, that extra turn, and would play himself into trouble. And Pollock did what Pollock's done. He's another one of these guys who looked really good in the first few games for us, and ever since then it's just been the same thing. Far too easily brushed off the ball, just loses possession every time, and frustrating because there's undoubtedly some talent in there with both of them, him and David, and they just didn't show it yesterday at all, I don't think.
I think with Pollock as well, you've got to remember that he was used sort of more of a central role yesterday, and again,
he's only 19. That's the other thing.
Again, very young lad, learning his way in the game. I think that for me, it's a tough one because I think he'll learn a lot from performances where it's just about needing the resilience and just the sort of like, if things don't work once, just keep going. And I know that a classic example of that is really Dylan Easton. And this time around,
I was about to say the exact same.
Yeah,
Easton is the king of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So often yesterday, Dylan Easton played himself into trouble where it would be, as such, never anything that led to anything dangerous, but he would maybe take a touch or two extra to see if he could wiggle his way out of trouble and find a better pass, and then next thing you know, there's two giants stomping their way over to him. But then
I've never seen a player more like the Easton, where you can tell in the first 5 minutes what kind of game he's going to have. Like, you just know whether he's on his game or not straight away.
But fortunately, he did the damage in the first 6 minutes of this game. So, yeah, he just, obviously, the confidence to be able to take the ball past the keeper and then fire it home is exactly why you have Dylan Easton, and you accept the moments where he gets closed down and he gets himself maybe into a bit of a pickle, and there's sort of players all over him. But yeah, for me, Finlay Pollock, I think that you can take a lot out of that, in terms of just being able to use that as an example of, like, well, fans, I think, will maybe get frustrated but you just need to keep going and you just need to keep your head and just be able to do that. Because again, it's just Easton's particularly good at just being able to get his head down and just keep getting on with it. And that's why I think you see with the stats, I'm no statistician myself. I'm not one for the XG or anything like that. But a lot of the time you'll see the stats come up for stuff like successful dribbles. And I think Dylan Easton's up there is like the highest attempted and highest successful in the division, or he certainly was last season. Because he just picks up the ball and just takes people, sizes them up and goes for it. Again, it's very easy for me to say as a non-football player, a jobber that knows nothing about the game. But yeah, just you've got to remember that with these young lads, that they are only 19 and that things will click into place over time the more that they're doing it. So just give them a bit of respite, I would say. To stick on the topic of the young lads, I know that you mentioned it, Alan, but Scott, just a word for Kai Montague, picks up the booking at the end, but is that the type of booking that you can kind of forgive, given that he's just going about, and he just seems to have this habit of being able to pick up bookings in situations like that, where he'll just absolutely harass a player to the point that he'll put in maybe a tackle that's going to break up the play and then picks up the booking for it. Do you think that's a positive in terms of his game?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it quite early on in the season. He came on in like a little cameo, sort of 10 minutes, and he was putting himself about, and you thought, well, this is not the sort of player we were expecting to sign, or what we had heard from like East Kilbride sort of side of things from last season. What we had heard was that this young lad was very talented, very skillful, liked to have the ball at his feet, and so you thought, oh, we're going to get somebody that's very technically gifted already at 17 years old. Yes, he'll need time to progress and probably to build himself up and gain confidence in the championship, because at the end of the day, he's came up 3 levels technically, so you're not expecting him to be hitting the ground running and being great. I mean, you're even seeing it with Lewis Gibson this season. So up and down, he's having great games, he's having not so good games. Again, still a teenager, also hadn't played in the championship before. So these guys, they'll take time, but I did thoroughly enjoy that sort of little bit at the end when Danny Wilson, who's been capped for Scotland, who's been at the highest level with Liverpool, Rangers, and he's getting sort of annoyed at a 17-year-old kid that was at East Kilbride last season and just started losing his rag. It was quite funny, but no, if that's what he does, just trying to sort of take the mickey out of them, as long as we're winning, and then you're going to see the funny side of it. But no, I think just to touch on the substitutions as well that you were discussing, I think it must have been difficult for like Pollock and even Montague and David coming on. At that time in the game, Livingston were on top and we were pretty much camped in our own end. It must be difficult to come into a game like that and trying to work your way into the game, for a better way of saying it. But I think the one thing I was a little bit disappointed was that we seemed to stop pressing in the second half, and that's what I was a bit. You've got guys like Danny Wilson, Ryan McGowan, and Nottingham at the back. These guys are all pretty slow, and they're all. Maybe Danny Wilson's not too bad on the ball. The other two certainly aren't. So I kind of expected maybe Pollock and Montague and sort of David to kind of press them a bit higher and at least try and force them into something, because that's what we did really well against Dunfermline. But it just wasn't there for some reason in the second half. And that, as I say, that was the only thing that kind of disappointed me yesterday, was the sort of just sitting off too deep and kind of stop the pressing. Although the push up the park for you and Murray to get all the way back to the Livy goalie was quite entertaining as well. But that was something to behold.
Yeah.
It comes back again to, it's exactly that kind of role that Scott Brown would have had in the team, which, and we could all see that Scott Brown would have definitely brought something to us in that aspect. So Potter and Mickey definitely know that. So again, it comes down to just showing that he absolutely wasn't ever in contention really for playing in the game. Otherwise, he would have definitely been brought on, because that's exactly what he'd have done. He'd have got right in their faces, and he just drives you forward, which is what we needed. But he obviously wasn't. And you know what? Rightly so, because you didn't want to risk. He's far too important a player to risk bringing him on for the last 10 minutes, and he gets, he breaks down, and that's him out for 3 months. You absolutely don't want that.
Yeah, that just to take it back a little bit, Scott, I'd forgotten about that Ewan Murray bit, but it rightfully deserves mention because that was so fun to watch. Like, you talk about having captain figures and leaders in your team, and sometimes you just need that moment, because it's a bit like last season with the sliding into Sunday against Dundee United with Jack Hamilton's tackle on Jack Walton. Like, sometimes, see, as a fan base, like, it doesn't necessarily need to be a goal. It's just something that gets people sort of like up on their feet and changes the atmosphere. Because after that, everyone was like, right, come on, let's get this done. Let's get this over the line, and just completely behind the team. Whereas before, it maybe being a bit more angsty, you had people sort of saying, oh, get up the pitch, need more pressure and things like that. Absolutely brilliant to see. I would say as well with the changes, for me, I think that is, we also kind of struggled in that I think that Lewis Jamieson was really just, he looked in a position where he just wasn't able to be the outlet that we needed, is when we sort of moved him more out wide. And I think it goes back, we've touched on it numerous times on the podcast before, just I don't think it's his strongest suit to be able to do that. So seeing Finlay Pollock come on for him, even if Pollock maybe didn't have the best game, I still think he definitely offered a lot more being able to go forward as an outlet compared to maybe Jamieson, who'd been put into that role and it just wasn't going to be a strong suit. I mean, of course, Jamieson, call him out as well. Really, really good assist as well to be able to get the ball across to Connolly earlier on in the match. And he had to put in a shift. So, yeah, full time comes, and that's 3 wins on the spin, 8 off either playoffs, albeit with a game in hand. So, Alan, just your thoughts on the current situation, and also just as well, a bit of a question. Is it a bit of a headache for any potential new manager coming in? Because now they've got to keep this going.
Sorry, I was just distracted by Motherwell going 2-0 up on Rangers there, which is also very funny. In terms of kind of where we are as a team, I feel like you're never sure that we're out of the woods, because we're Rovers. We've all been watching this team long enough to know. But we're 8 points ahead of Dunfermline now, who are in 9th, with a game in hand on them as well. So you start to feel like there's less pressure. You can start looking at the teams above you rather than worrying about the teams below you. And I mean, Airdrie are doomed. They are just doomed. So it is only a relegation playoff that you've got to worry about, really. I think if we win our game in hand, we go above Queen's Park. And it wasn't that long ago that everyone was talking about a top 5 and a bottom 5, and Queen's Park being the team that were challenging for the playoffs. So if they're challenging for the playoffs, then we're in with a shout. We've got some ground to make up, but we've only played half our league games. There's still 18 to go. There's a lot of points to play for. If we can, continue picking up wins at the rate we have done in the last few weeks, I see no reason at all why we can't get ourselves in there. And for a new manager coming in, there's not really any. I mean, there's always pressure as a football manager, but I think the position that they find us in, there's not expectation so much. I think it's very much going to be like, if a new manager comes in and Andy Barrowman saying to him, you've got to get us in the playoffs, seems a bit harsh. Ultimately, they're going to be saying, get us as high up the table as you can, and if we can get involved in the playoffs, brilliant. But it's just about coming in and keeping the momentum that we've built over the last few weeks. That's the biggest thing. Momentum's a big thing in football, and we need to keep it. So good job. We've got a nice, easy game on Saturday.
Yeah, a trip to Somerset Park, of course, awaits us next, but we'll get to that in due course. Just, Scott, just for you, just what were your sort of thoughts on where we're at the moment? Obviously, again, as Alan rightfully says, we're only a point behind Queen's Park now, with a game extra play, and we do have that sort of cushion over Dunfermline, 8 points, with a game less played. Just Aki's and Morton are also below us, so Aki's sitting on 21 points, Morton on 20. Just, do you think that we're we're just in a position where we've obviously still got guys to come back. We've been floored with illness as well over the last few weeks. Do you think this really shows the sort of resiliency within the squad? You're really in a position where you've seen 2 permanent managers come and go, and just a bit of reason for optimism without sort of getting, right, we're out the woods, as Alan said.
Absolutely. I think we had a good chat after the Falkirk game about how things were looking, and we were all pretty honest in terms of, I think at that point folk were starting to really worry, and rightly so, because you were 15 games into the season by that point and going, well, where the hell are we going to end up this season? Because it was starting to look like we were going to be battling to stay away for 9th, and I know it's only been 3 weeks, but it's quite quick how it's turned around. You get 9 points in 3 games, and then you're fired right back in towards the sort of promotion playoffs. What we did need that first game after the Falkirk game was a bounce back, and it's what we asked for, and they've given us even more than that. They've went and continued on the good work that they built on the Dunfermline game, but you just hope now that you don't want to see if they were to get maybe a defeat in the next couple of weeks or whatever, and then it to kind of go back to how it was before. You just kind of need to, as every manager says, take it game by game and see how we feature going forward. But I do think that there is definitely a sort of good feel good factor back at the club again in terms of on the field, because there was it was looking a bit grim at the start of this month, but it's definitely, whether it's the festive sort of period, everybody's a bit more upbeat as well over this time, but it's definitely the Rovers picking up results has definitely helped. And I think I'd put into our group chat before the Falkirk game at the start of the month saying, right, we've got 4 games in December, so 12 points. If we could get 8 or 9 points, we've had a very good month. We've ended up with 9.
Yep.
So I think it's been a very good month, and I think it was actually Ian that went, Scott, behave, we're going to get about 4 at max, the way that it had been going. And then, to be fair, I then had to retract it after the Falkirk game, because I was like, God, if this is how it's going to go, then this ain't going to be it.
If we get 1,
no, we've scored 6 goals in 3 games, and we have bounced back. So fair play to the players and the staff, and hopefully there's more to come in January.
It shows you how mad this league is, though. That, like, funny enough, I think I'm right in saying we've still not beaten a team who were below us in the league, because Dunfermline were actually above us on goal difference the day that we beat them. But that just shows you how mental this league is, because a couple of weeks ago they were above us, and we're now 8 points ahead of them with a game in hand. It's just it's that kind of start that gives you the kind of confidence that, you know what, yes, Thistle are whatever they are, 8-10 points ahead of us, but all it takes is for us to continue a good run. They lose a couple of games, and we're right back in there.
Happy to put a wee pin in that one just by saying that.
Airdrie, of course.
I get that. Look, I think the results against the teams at the bottom end of the table as well, there's definitely areas that you'll hope to see improvement. I think as well it's worth viewing it in the context that, like, you can understand why people were so down after the Falkirk game, particularly the manner of it that seemed to be. But also as well, you've got to be, I feel like for me, it's really a potential sliding doors moment in terms of, like, where we go from here with the new manager coming in. We'll obviously have Jordan Doherty available next week. I know that a lot's been made in terms of, will he stay or will he go? I imagine that, given that he's under contract, that he should be available for next week. I know that he's seemingly back in Dublin at the moment for his family for Christmas. But if you take that and then you add in the factor of potentially having Lewis Vaughan back, and then the work that we can do in January to be able to sign in players, there's every reason to be optimistic going forward. But at the same time, you've got to caveat it that the performances over the last few games have been hard fought. Maybe not classic football matches that we're looking at and purring about the display as such. We've put in sort of maybe 3 very, very good halves of football, and then 3 maybe flatter halves of football, I think it would be fair to say. But as fans, I think that the thing that came up for me and we were taught, and I think it was Scott, you mentioned this before, is that you would take Rovers just being compact, solid, maybe not the most entertaining to watch, but getting results. Because ultimately, that's what you need at this point. You need them to just get that. And they've done that. So fair play to them, as you say. And particularly the likes of Freeman and Connolly coming back in from the cold. They seem to be forming a really good partnership down the right-hand side. So long may that continue. So we will obviously see how it goes. Alan, I just want to touch on one final bit about this match before we go on to the man of the match discussion. Just Keith, your thoughts on David Martindale's post-match meltdown, shall we say? What were your thoughts on that?
Which one? Because I've listened to two of his interviews. One of them, the Livingston TV one, was where he claimed that they should have had another penalty, and he thought that both the tackle on Tete Yengi and Freeman's kind of high boot on the other lad whose name I can't remember should have been red cards. I specifically watched, they weren't on the highlights, so I specifically watched the kind of full match thing and found those parts. The one on Yengi, not for me. I don't even know that it's necessarily a foul. I think he kind of catches them a little bit, but it's certainly not a red card. I wouldn't be looking for it if it was the other way. The Freeman one, his boot's high, but the guy's head's low. For me, free kick and a yellow card's probably right. And again, I wouldn't be screaming for it if it was the other way. But also, if he had been sent off for it, I wouldn't have been saying that's outrageous. It's the worst decision I've ever seen. But I think he probably gets it right. And we've obviously already discussed the penalty. The funnier one was the BBC interview, where I genuinely think he just goes into autopilot sometimes. Brian McLaughlin says to him, the transfer window's opening and next week, are you going to be bringing anyone in? And he's like, oh, no, we've not got the money for that. We're really struggling. And I'm just like, it's no last season. You can't be sitting there claiming to have the worst budget in the league anymore. You got £1.5 million quid or something from solidarity payments and parachute payments and all that kind of nonsense. They clearly have the biggest budget in this league. It's nonsense. Yes, they're not getting their stand filled with Rangers, Celtic, Hearts and Hibs fans, which is basically that is what keeps them going. But he said something about how he hopes they get some investment in the club because they've not got the fan base to be at the top level, so they need that investment. It's like, all right, so you're basically wanting to breach financial fair play rules then. I don't even know if they're a thing in Scotland or not. I don't know.
They are.
But it's basically saying, yeah, you want to be artificially promoted by pumping money in because you're too much a wee diddy club to actually do it through your own fans. Which, you know what, that's a bit of a harsh statement. That's no slight on the fans who do turn up every week. You can't slag off like the 320 who were there yesterday for the fact that the rest of their town supports Rangers, Celtic, Hearts and Hibs. It's not their fault. Yeah. Fair play to these guys for turning up every week is what I see on that one.
Yeah, I mean, look, see, for me with Martindale, I think that you look back to that last game at Almondvale and the way that the context that they won it, and that we were very much in charge for the majority of the game. And then Liam Dick got sent off for nothing. Like, just really, it shows this league in particular that if we'd won those games against Livingston, which is very, very feasible to say, given the performances in the first and the second game. I mean, we had a sort of loose Vaughan cannoned a header, or rocketed a header. I don't know the best word to describe it. Fired a header against the bar. What's the best way to describe a header? Put a header against the bar, and then they go up the pitch.
There we go.
Bulleted a header against the bar. Thank you, Alan. And then they go up the pitch and get a goal. And also, as well, we had a really decent shout for a handball turned down. So you throw in the fact that, and then the last game. But if you take the 6 points off them and add 6 points on to us, we're level with them on points. So it shows you the sort of thin margins that we're.
Someone said yesterday in the club after the game that I think they've got the first two games they had taken 6 points, but had only been ahead for a total of 2.5 minutes across those two games, or something crazy like that. It's like, that's just mental.
Yeah. So long may it continue that we're picking up points over Livingston. I know they've had a bit of an Indian spell over us over the last few years, naturally given they've been in the cup. cup exits at Almondvale. I think we've been there 3 times and been knocked out every single time. But then they will have more money to spend than us, just due to the prize money within the leagues. So yeah, long may that continue. That we're getting one update via Martindale. So yeah, just to round things off, just a quick discussion on man of the match. So Scott, who was your man of the match? A lot of contenders out there.
Yeah, it was quite tough, to be honest, because like I said earlier on, you could have given it to any of the 5 at the back, and I wouldn't have disagreed with it. I actually disagreed with the man of the match, which was given to Ross Matthews. I thought Matthews was fine, but I didn't think he was as good as maybe the back line. But yeah, I think Ad came down on it. Was that you could have picked out Hanlon, Dicko, or Murray. They were my sort of 3 that stood out. I just thought the 3 of them really sort of marshalled that back line really well and kind of dealt with any sort of crosses that came. There was only really one cross that I kind of got a bit nervous that it kind of flashed across, and again, maybe Kev could have taken a bit of pressure off them and slid out to catch it. But other than that, I thought you said it well. They kind of kept them at arm's length, and so to be honest, I would have given it to any of them 3. If I had to pick one, I would possibly go Paul Hanlon, but yeah, it was pretty tight between any of the defence, to be honest.
Alan, you're nodding your head there. Who was your man of the match?
The biggest agreement is that it's just really tough to pick for a very, very good reason. You know, there's been plenty of games where it's been hard to pick for the opposite reason, the Falkirk game being one of them. If you'd asked me at half time, I would have said Sean Byrne. I thought Sean Byrne was outstanding in the first half. But I think just based on the overall 90 minutes, I'd probably, and Graham will like this, I'd probably lean towards Liam Dick. And ironically, the kind of 2 points that I single out are actually from the first half, despite me saying that I thought Sean Byrne was the man of the match in the first half. And it was the pass to Easton and the headed clearance off the line, which were, you know, he doesn't do those 2 things and we potentially go 1-0 down, and it's a very different game. So I thought the whole back line were outstanding. Kev did nothing wrong the whole game. Again, it's, you know, he was perfectly fine. I thought his kicking was actually decent as well, despite some bizarre folk whinging on Facebook as usual about his kicking being terrible. I thought his kicking was actually all right. But yeah, I think I'd go with Liam Dick just for those 2 big moments. The Murray and Hanlon were brilliant throughout without having necessarily the same kind of pivotal moments in the game.
Yeah, I was firmly into the Liam Dick for man of the match yesterday category. Again, I'd actually forgotten about the clearance off the line until you mentioned it there, but that was also very good. I would maybe say with Kev that I think there was a bit of points in the first half in particular where maybe sort of the communication between him and his defenders could have been a bit better, coming clear and collecting balls. But again, as you say, didn't have any impact on the game. Didn't have any sort of tangible like negative, and nothing really you could have done for the penalty given the circumstances. So that will round us off for this episode of the Oh No 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 podcast. So thank you for taking the time to listen. Also as well, just to say thank you to the Macmillan Lounge for the hospitality that we had yesterday after the game. It was just great to be in there, and had a few folk coming up to us chatting to folk about the podcast, which was great to hear. So if you did so, thank you very much. But yeah, we will be back, no doubt, I'd imagine later on this week, if our people are still in holiday mode, our folk are getting back to work, for a preview of yet another trip down to Somerset Park. Oh God, can we really be bored with another one going down there? But yes, familiarity breeds contempt on that one, shall we say. But yeah, thank you for taking the time to listen, and bye for now.